Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor. And today with me, Jeff is back to discuss Valkyrie, but really specifically Count Klaus von Stauffenberg and the fact that he is one of the few right-wing heroes of Hollywood. And we're going to discuss why that is, and we're going to break down the what what our definition of right wingers, or what mine is at least, and then
hmm
Jeff can give us his if he'd like, and then but first of all, this will actually be coming out after a solo episode of mine where I will be just giving my own opinion um about the movie itself, about the whole movie. This is just sort of an element of it. I know some people wanted me to do some solo videos about sort of the topics, probably so just I could get through all my thoughts fully. So we're going to do that, and also you'll be able to find a Substack article on this topic uh, within the week. So uh, uh, if anybody wants to support the show, go sign up for a subscription over at Palantir's Hope on Substack. The link will be in the description. Well, Jeff, welcome back. How are you doing?
Thank you, Connor. I'm doing pretty well. A little overstuffed still from Thanksgiving, but enjoying the move into Advent as we prepare to celebrate Christmas and having a little bit more of a penitential and preparatory season. So overall, doing well.
Yeah, I've been on a diet for a while, and I think Thanksgiving kind of set me back a little bit, so to
Yeah,
speak.
same.
So I'm getting back onto that. We'll see. I think it's harder to uh, diet or fast in the winter than it
Yes.
is in the summer. I think we want some sense of comfort, I think, in the winter, and and it's harder to resist then.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's also just harder to get out and be active. So even if you're not really changing your diet, it's hard not to pack on a few pounds.
Yes, you become a bear.
Yep.
Anyways, so I'm just going to give my definition of right wing, and that is also I'm taking my definition from Paul Gottfried's definition of right wing. So the right wing is somebody who does not believe in human equality, uh, someone who believes in hierarchy and believes in traditional morals or
Okay.
traditional values. So that is my because you can fit you can try and fit a bunch of things into right wing, but I think that's a uh decent you know uh definition. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Especially as Catholics, we can't just say, they're Republican or conservative, as we are calling, the political movement these days, because that's just not enough. I just put that in our private chat so that I can reference back to your definition that you were using. But
Oh,
um,
don't forget the
I,
inequality of men,
yeah,
which
um,
is by definition sort of a liberal definition.
yeah, it's definitely a liberal value, if you can even call liberal values as such, but to believe in the equality of man.
Well, it's
So,
interesting. It's kind of like if you look at what we imagine heaven is like.
mhm,
What do we have in heaven? We have a hierarchy. We have, and part of that is inequality. There are certainly different levels of sort of that people have made it to
yep,
in their quest for heaven, and obviously the fact that we have sort of a queen of heaven, certainly puts Mary very high up, and then you have our Lord, above that, and so what I'm saying is, by definition, Christians have to believe in those two things. The problem is that the sort of neoconservative view of right wing is actually just left wing, but with um, left wing or like center left democracy, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I ultimately would agree with, like, that's a good proper definition of right wing because, yeah, it we shouldn't be fighting for liberal values because liberal values came out of the so-called Enlightenment, which was actually an endarkenment, and then the Protestant called Reformation, but it was actually revolution. Like, even just the language that we use about all of these already kind of mythicizes those movements, even though they were ultimately evil things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that believes in the inequality of man, believes in hierarchy and traditional morals makes sense. I mean, even as a married man, I have to be willing to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that those who are called to a celibate life, especially priests and nuns, have a higher vocation than I do. That doesn't mean that they're automatically better than me, but most likely they, if they're living it out well, they are better than me. And I still have to work with the grace that God has given me to become as holy as I can, but it's still not going to matter because they will have a higher calling than I do.
And also
And
think about it this way is, creation has a hierarchy. We will always be above animals, no
mhm,
matter how many, no matter how the sort of animal rights activists want to, complain.
exactly. To save the life of one, I would happily see the extinction of a species. Like, it's just the way it is. Human life is worth more, period, because we are spirit as well as material.
Well said. It's and it's interesting that sort of that there would be a right wing hero, and that's the premise of this podcast is that this is almost singled out as the only right wing hero. I mean, there are probably others, but I can't think of very many right wing heroes. They if they are sort of um, coded right wing, they're often used for left wing purposes.
Yeah, just like you talked about 2 weeks ago when we were going through A Few Good Men, the good Republican from Sorkin.
Yes, yes, the good Republican, but the good Republican is usually a neoconservative.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So they're not they're still left wing in nature, generally speaking, but they sort of and usually a key aspect of this is that they usually throw fellow right wingers under the bus.
Right.
Now now we can sort of the big difference, I guess, one of the things is that so let's so we have Valkyrie is basically a movie where you have the resistance to Hitler and you have the contrast between that. And the movie was inspired as a sort of a sequel of the movie Conspiracy, which is about the Swansea conference, which planned the death camps basically in World War II.
Hmm.
So it's supposed to be sort of the alternative version. So the people that uh, went along with Hitler till the end, and those who resisted Hitler.
Hmm.
And the writer actually was inspired to write this movie because of that.
Interesting. I didn't know that there was that connection between the two.
Yes, and that's why there were a number of actors that actually uh, jump between both movies.
Oh, fascinating.
You have what's the guy who played Tresco?
Um, I've got the cast up. Give me a second.
He's in Harry Potter as well. The bad Defense Against the Dark Arts guy. And I mean bad, I mean incompetent.
Tresco. Oh, Kenneth Branagh.
Yes, Kenneth Branagh
Uh,
is in both, which is funny
and
because he leads the resistance more or less in the and then he's Reinhard Heydrich in the conspiracy movie.
yeah, I think he's a phenomenal actor. I really enjoy what he's able to do. Doesn't
Yes,
mean I like him as an individual.
sure, exactly. But his I've watched one of them and I've heard the other two are pretty bad. His version of Poirot
Hmm. I've
Um,
seen the first, and I wasn't overwhelmed by it. I thought he acted well in it, but I believe he directed it as well, and I thought it was just kind of a trash movie.
yeah, exactly. So it's not like he's not perfect or anything like that. But anyways, it's
Yeah.
just interesting that comparison. So that's but because Tom Cruise and uh Bryan Singer joined the project, it became less about sort of ideas and sort of focus on the resistance, and it turned into an assassination plot.
Yeah, which, apparently, it was Tom Cruise initially meeting, Bryan Singer on Mission Impossible was when he realized he wanted to work with him, and then they came together finally on this movie.
Well, what's interesting is the writer went on to write Mission Impossible movies afterwards.
Yeah. Huh, I
So,
didn't know
so
that.
yeah, this has been a big part of that guy's career.
Mhm.
Anyways, he seems very talented. I kind of wish he would do more of these types of movies than sort of his Mission Impossible movies.
Yeah, I would agree, like, because this movie ultimately is kind of a I would classify it as a political suspense thriller almost. Like, just because it's building up the tension, waiting for the plot, and you're waiting to see, is this actually going to work? Which he does an incredible job of building that tension, given the fact that everybody going into this knows exactly how it's going to end. And that's
Yes.
actually one of the reasons why I didn't watch this movie for years after it came out, because it's hard to make yourself sit down and commit to watching something and get invested in characters that you know are going to fail and are going to be executed.
Well, it's kind of the same reason. I mean, in a different way. It's a reason I didn't want to watch Downfall.
Mm,
Just because I know the end. It's not like there's no and all the people are so evil in Downfall, right? So
yeah,
like
yeah.
I just didn't want to. But I had to watch it when I was in college. I had to watch it for a class. But anyways, that so in a similar but different way, uh, Valkyrie is kind of off-putting. Though I think one of the reasons I was originally uninterested in the movie is I because Tom Cruise was involved. I thought it was going to be kind of a um I don't know, not very accurate movie. Not that it's entirely accurate, but just that it was going to be not very faithful.
Yeah, just heavily focused on Tom Cruise as Tom Cruise.
Yes, I thought he actually plays a character in this
Yeah,
movie. Like,
yeah, and he does a really good job with it. But apparently, it actually was a huge problem with them getting permission to film in Germany that Tom
yeah, well,
Cruise was involved.
yes, because of what's Scientology.
Yep.
The Germans really don't like Scientology, which I can't help but agree with them.
Yeah, I mean, freedom of religion is a liberal view. It's not a Catholic value.
Well, it's not even in Germany's argument isn't about religion at all. It's they don't believe it is a religion.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like
They don't they
it's a
don't
cult.
like they categorize it as something not a religion. They're not arguing based on not freedom of religion. So it's kind of interesting that what their argument is.
Yeah.
But anyways, they eventually allowed it to happen. Of course, I don't know what that involved. Uh,
Yeah. But your concern that it was just going to be like Tom Cruise set in World War II was actually shared by some of the von Stauffenberg's descendants. They thought that Tom Cruise was going to turn it into slop, basically.
Yeah, which I mean, it kind of goes in between, like it's sort of in between slop and good, like perfect movie. It seems to me that if the writer got more of what he wanted, it would be a really like top notch movie.
Hmm.
But I think because Bryan Singer is basically a superhero director, it had to be kind of this superhero movie, sort of in the context of World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now, Stauffenberg, of course, he fits all three premises for being a right wing hero. He certainly believes in hierarchy. He is a count, he is not just a colonel in the military. He is
Hmm.
also a noble. So
Hmm.
he is a Catholic nobleman. So you have the traditional morals. He has a a beautiful family that is used well. Like they use the fact that he has a family, and they have great they use the kids in the best way possible in this movie to
Hmm.
elicit sort of the desire for their success. Knowing what he's willing to sacrifice, you know, even though they survive, which is interesting. Um,
Hmm.
they set it up to sort of. I mean, I get it that Stauffenberg wouldn't know whether or not his family would survive afterwards.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but he does. But his family does survive at the end, and obviously we're talking. Jeff was mentioned his descendants, his kids and stuff.
Hmm.
Their concerns with it, which I believe his wife died in 2006, which is set at the end of the movie.
Hmm.
And it's certainly that you don't have to be surprised. You're not surprised that Stauffenberg would also believe that men are not created equal. That are not equal. I mean, the the belief um, of the resistance wasn't so much against a lot of the things that um, the Reich was doing, a lot of the policies, but more about how they carried them out, and the inhumanity in which their principles led them to, and actually the fact that they just really didn't have any principles, and that they were considered just sort of power hungry um,
Yeah.
people. So it's not so much that in the way that um, the right wing governments have more structured social policies, hierarchies, and a recognizing that humans are not the same as each other. The same thing would go for Stauffenberg. Their
Hmm.
argument was the evilness and the willingness to destroy all of humanity, basically for Hitler's ego, for Hitler's desire for power.
Yeah.
And at first, they went back and forth. I mean, I currently reading a book on the resistance, and this isn't supposed to be a history on the resistance. This is just this is just my little
Background.
bit. This is just some background about it. I don't. Stauffenberg was at most a lot of these people that participated in the operation, in the assassinations, to, were more or less. Uh, I guess they went along until they couldn't go along, which I think which one of the great things that sort of Stauffenberg argues in one of his meetings with the resistance is that he can't he won't participate unless it has a chance of success because of what he would be giving up.
Right,
And
which is a proper way to, in my opinion, assess if I think that's a part of just war theory, isn't it?
yes, that's um one of Augustine's
Prerequisites.
prerequisites for a just war
Hmm.
is a possibility of success.
Yeah.
And so of course Stauffenberg is able to be a hero, or he's able to be depicted as a hero on screen because his enemy is Hitler.
Yeah. And that's what we were mentioning before the show is like there's a reason that he's one of the only times that it's allowed to have a right wing hero because it's against Hitler.
And he has all the trappings, also just like, he's a military officer. Let's just say this: the Germans knew how to design a uniform.
Yeah.
Like they at least, well, of course the aesthetics weren't Nazi aesthetics.
No,
The
it
aes-
was he was part of the Wehrmacht.
yeah, the aesthetics were classic German aesthetics well before Nazis came to power. And what's
Yeah.
crazy is one of the uh, the Iron Cross is banned in Germany. I don't know if you're
Today?
familiar with that. Yeah, today it's banned in
Oh,
Germany
no, I didn't know that.
because of its association. Even
Yeah.
though the Iron Cross was a military, was given out as a military decoration or
Yeah,
award
award.
uh, for long before
Mhm.
Nazis took to power. But of course,
Well, we
one of
also can't go too far into saying Germany anything because Germany wasn't unified until 1870 as it was. So
I know
they're
what I
just
mean
their
is
own. Yeah.
what I'm talking about is Prussia,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
There we go.
I'm saying so Germany Germany, as long as it's existed up
Hmm.
until World War II, used
Yeah.
the Iron Cross, and before that, the Prussians used the Iron
Yeah.
Cross. But there's nothing Nazi about the Iron Cross.
Yeah.
It's kind of reminds me a little bit of I don't know. Pete Hegseth was trying to be smeared. Was They tried to smear him because he has a
The
Jerusalem
Jerusalem cross.
cross, yeah, tattooed on him.
Yep.
And some people are so stupid that they thought it was a Iron Cross,
Yeah.
which again, not related to Nazism really, anyways.
Hmm.
More like a symbol of what the Nazis wanted to supplant.
Yep.
Like this is the thing people don't understand is when a society is taken over by crazies, and this is any society, they commandeer everything that society represented previously, and then they slowly remove the symbols of what that society used to hold dear and
Hmm.
replace it with their own symbols.
Yep.
But there's a long stretch of time before people are fully, willing to give up all their symbols.
Yeah.
And those symbols are of hope, not of oppression or not of totalitarianism. Like, if anything, it's a symbolic of the fact that the Wehrmacht, which is the German military
Hmm.
or army, I should say, the German
Yeah.
army, uh, was independent.
Yeah. That's what a lot. It wasn't until well after college that I actually finally grasped that definition because the Wehrmacht was just the military, and the SS was trying to control it from the outside. But like this movie did a really good job of showing the distinction between like the Nazis, the SS, and then like the rest of military and political commands. Like they were not completely under one single hegemony, even though it seemed like that from the outside.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the antithesis to sort of the Indiana Jones movies.
Hmm. Yep.
If you watch the Indiana Jones movies, the Nazis are Germans basically,
Yeah.
which is
Every German's a Nazi.
but that's also been the narrative since the 60s.
Hmm.
Like it used to be, the Nazis were responsible um for the death camps, for all
Yeah.
the atrocities. But it then became, no, Germans are responsible. And then it became all white people are responsible. And now, like everyone is basically like everyone but Jews are responsible for the atrocities.
Yeah.
I don't even like like everyone people will bring up the atrocities in order to smear anyone, even if they're like just Americans who have been in America for a few hundred years or whatever, and never
Yeah.
had anything to do with it.
Well, one of the biggest examples to me for this is the huge shift in opinion against Pius XII starting in the 60s, because
Yes.
he was recognized as having done as much, if not more, than most political leaders in Europe to speak out against Nazism. But then it started to become in the 60s. he didn't do enough. He didn't speak out enough. So he just was protecting his people and didn't care about the Jews, neglecting the fact that he personally was ordered over 3,000 Jews to be hidden at some point in the Vatican and then smuggled out through Castel Sant'Angelo. Like
Yeah.
he had a huge impact, and he was incredibly courageous for what he did, but they don't care. Like everyone's got to be blamed for it, basically.
Well, but he also represents a sort of a right-wing hero too.
Yeah, that's true.
And in some ways, because Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise, I think he gets away, like Tom Cruise gets away with this movie.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because
But also remember, though, even though he is the hero, he still ends up dead.
yeah, but what about that?
Oh, I was just saying, like he's not even allowed to be triumphant in
Oh,
portraying a right-wing hero. I know that it's historical, but again, I think that's another reason why this is allowed to be told.
but it's actually perfect for right-wing heroes because most right-wing heroes fail.
That's true.
If right-wing heroes won, we wouldn't be living in a left-wing world.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it's kind of inevitable. All the like it's like the Von Day movie that we watched.
Hmm.
I mean, the hero had to die.
Yeah, I still really liked that movie. I thank you again for having me watch that.
No problem. I'm hoping more people come up with those types of movies. Like I would say that Von Day movie actually kind of falls in line with this type with Valkyrie, which Valkyrie is just a millions of dollars more movie.
Absolutely, and also in English, so easier to get
That's
a wide audience.
that's true. But there's something about but it is kind of interesting because the accents are also inconsistent.
Yeah,
Like I mean they were not able to do anything. There was no consistency in almost anything. They just kind of made Hitler German. I
yeah,
believe all the actors just used their natural accents.
yeah.
I think that's basically what they told them. And they had a lot of Shakespearean actors participating in this movie, which sort of raised sort of the quality of the work.
Right, and it's interesting that you mentioned Shakespearean because I think that this is one of the this does happen, but not that frequently. That again, you go in knowing that it's going to end in tragedy. Like you're going in knowing he's going to die, and they're going to fail, and the Nazis will prevail for this moment.
That's true. There aren't, I think some of the only, if my understanding is correct, a lot of Shakespearean plays, like the only ones that are mainly like success, like that don't end in tragedy or whatever, are like historical ones.
Also, there's he's got the historical, the
Yeah,
tragic, and the comedy.
yeah, but
And
are the comedies that like never mind. What was the last part?
I was just gonna say that traditionally, like even going back to Aristotle talking about plays, a comedy ends in a marriage, and a tragedy ends with a death.
Okay, so yes, so comedies. He still had comedies, I guess, and some historical ones were also, ended well for
Hmm.
the most part. Anyways, so but yeah, this is a very Shakespeare. This is a tragedy. This is obviously just a Shakespearean tragedy, and though so one of the things that he sort of says at the end is "Long live sacred Germany." Which is very much an alternative to three things. So, or not two, alternative to two things. So you would say, so what would Hitler's Germany be? It would be long live the 1,000-year Reich or something like
Yeah,
that.
or the Third
You know,
Reich.
like long live um the 1,000-year Reich, and then the if you were to sort of long live Germany of today, it would probably be like liberal democracy Germany,
Yeah.
right? Sacred Germany is completely different. That might be one of the most sort of right-wing things that they could possibly say in at the end of the movie. I mean, Beck also does say that, which is interesting because I don't Beck is sort of a traditional Prussian Junker. He is like a traditional Prussian nobleman
Mm,
or
yeah.
noble soldier. He's not like a
Yeah.
high nobleman. And then Stauffenberg is a traditional Catholic nobleman, like a count. He's a full blown nobleman.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's kind of a showing of, and sorry, the resistance is a grouping of a lot of different types of people. Many of them, they're mostly right wing people, but there's but uh but of course the only other resistance member that ever gets traction from like Hollywood and even in Angel Studios is doing another movie about him is Bonhoeffer,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
he is not even a Christian. I mean, he denies the Trinity.
Yeah.
So they love picking out some like left wing resistance members, but this is the only movie in which it sort of goes into sort of all the different right wing ones, which they don't share necessarily ideologies. They just kind of share that they are right wing. Like it's kind of a conglomeration of various different right wing people. So some are traditional Protestant right wingers. Some of them are militarists. Some of them are Catholic aristocrats. You know, it's a very much a conglomeration of different views, and it's actually in some ways it's kind of a format that we might take inspiration from in America, given the fact that there is no real strong right wing ideology that unifies American right wingers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I was just thinking, and I was able to think of one other that I think we could classify as a right-wing hero in a movie,
Hollywood.
and yeah, in Hollywood. And again, I'm talking hero, not the protagonist of the film, but in
Oh,
Casablanca, I,
I haven't seen that
Rick.
movie.
Okay, so also set World War II Germany. Um, First of all, you need to watch the movie.
Okay,
It's my all-time favorite. Just so many great little quips, like witty humor. It's fantastic. But regardless, um, Rick is the owner of a cafe, and his old uh, flame comes into town, and she's with another man who's named Victor Laszlo, and he's actually truly a heroic figure, and he's right wing. He's been the leader of the resistance against the Nazis in France for years, and he's been into concentration camps and escaped, and he's explicitly Catholic in the film. So he's a right wing person. He is a hero. He's not the protagonist of the film because it's more focused on Rick, or it is
okay.
focused on Rick, but he is the hero of the film. So that's just one. I've been trying to rack my brain for other examples,
But
and
they share commonality. The two.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
still against the Nazis.
still against the Nazis. I mean, they'll see. I mean, it's harder for them to make, I think, movies about the Soviets and stuff like that, but they would totally, accept the Soviets as heroes.
Yeah,
But I
I would
think
agree.
it doesn't work now because the left has made Russia the ultimate enemy now,
As of now, yeah.
so they can't make Soviet like the pro-Soviet stuff is impossible now. It really can't be done. Um,
Yeah,
which
and we
which
can't see anything with pro-communist China. Like there's not going to be anything there.
well, yeah, well, I don't think anyone cares enough about communist China.
Exactly.
Like, you know, they'll put communist Chinese actors into movies,
Hmm.
right? Like, but they and add some and might have a sympathetic, you know, tone to communist China, but it will probably be in a movie about American Chinese people or something like that.
Yeah.
Like that,
One of
yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, one character that should be portrayed as a right-wing hero, but never has been, in my opinion, is Jack Ryan. Like, from reading the books,
Oh, okay.
he, um, he is an avowed Catholic. Um, he does believe in hierarchy, has traditional morals. Like, he is a good, solid man. He also happens to be conservative in the books, but in the movies, that's basically just glossed over, and they almost always turn him into an action hero when that's never been
Oh,
his
really?
character.
Oh.
Yeah, he's an
Who's
analyst at
that?
CIA.
Who's Jack Ryan created by? Who wrote him?
Tom Clancy.
Tom Clancy. Is Tom Clancy somewhat right wing?
Yes, and he's Catholic as well, or he
Really?
was. He's dead.
It was. Oh, he's dead. Well, okay. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Check. I've never read any of his books. I've watched, I think, at least one of the Jack Ryan movies, and then I've isn't what was it called? It's with Tom Cruise. Uh,
There's. Are you thinking Jack Reacher?
no, no. Oh no, no. It's a different writer. I'm thinking about somebody else.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the not the accountant? It's about a lawyer. He's a lawyer,
I
but
don't
not,
think so.
yeah, whatever. It's fine. It's not by Tom Clancy. I'm thinking of somebody else, a different writer who writes mystery novels, I think.
Okay.
Um, yeah. Anyways, so yeah, so we have sort of the basis for what makes Stauffenberg a right wing hero.
Yeah.
And yes, our inability to figure out others for the most part, puts it into perspective how kind of lucky we have it. Though, um, of course, you can't really have a right wing hero in a non-Nazi context, um, because who would that right wing hero be fighting? If there's no Nazis, he has to be fighting left wingers most likely.
Yeah. Like, I think that there could be some really like it's just incredible that that is not permissible and it's not found in Hollywood. Yet you'll
Ooh,
have biopics that are, you know, lionizing pedophile abusers like Harvey Milk. Like,
I
it's
do
insane.
I do not know what you're talking about. Who is that?
He was one of the first openly gay politicians. He was elected in San Francisco.
Ah,
Um, and like did a lot towards in the 60s towards normalizing
homosexuality.
homosexuality, and
Yeah.
he actually had very close ties with Jim Jones from Jonestown,
Wait, who's that? Oh, yeah. Now I get it.
the cult leader. Like,
Yeah.
but anyways, there's the dude was a pedophile and like a serial abuser of young boys that he had groomed, and yet that's just glossed over, and they're going to make a film honoring his achievements as the first openly gay man elected.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I understand why they do that, because they don't really care about um what happened. They care about what it symbolizes.
Yep, exactly.
And the reason they're okay with this movie is because they still think they can make it symbolize what they want it to symbolize. They try and make this movie like sort of all about mankind, as a whole. They try to sort of infuse some liberal elements into the mouths of the actors, into the
Hmm.
character's mouth. But it doesn't, but I think I don't think it's coming from the writer. I think it's coming from the director. That's my guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I because he's worried about making a commercial success, but
Yes.
the other the other issue really is that they
Well, also, isn't
I
Bryan Singer kind of, always, isn't the rumor has it that he's a pedophile or maybe a pedophile?
I honestly don't know. I haven't looked into it much.
I've always heard things about Bryan Singer's parties because there's a lot
Um,
of young boys, at Bryan Singer's parties and stuff like that. At least
Unfortunately, it's all too common in Hollywood, so I wouldn't be surprised, but I honestly just don't have a clue. But
so yes, so what I'm saying is just that Bryan Singer kind of, he seems to be a very much an ideologue.
mhm,
Um, that but I don't think based on just the reason the writer wrote this movie, I don't
yeah,
think he's as much of an ideologue. I think he's more genuinely curious and
mhm.
wanted to actually put forward the story as best as he could possibly do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other thing that's necessary that as a precondition for being able to make this film is the fact that, at least in their own minds, not in any way in reality or anyone that has a brain, is that they've associated Nazis with right wingers in America today.
That's true.
Like,
Well,
it-
I would point out that our definition, they fall, they sort of, you could say they kind of get 2 out of the 3,
right,
but they
but
don't.
that's the most important one. Uh,
Inequality is the most important one?
no,
Or
they get, uh,
traditional morals, the
yes,
one that they don't get is the
yes,
most
is
important one.
yes,
Yes. So, yes, of course, it guides the other 2. If you
mhm,
have the 3rd and then you move into the other 2, you will not, there's ways to abuse both, the understanding of inequality, between men, and also, uh, the belief in hierarchy. Like, there's
yeah.
ways to abuse that if you don't have the 3rd.
Exactly. It's like having fortitude and temperance, which pretty much every like bodybuilder you're ever going to come across has those two things. If you don't have prudence to guide them, you're going to overwork yourself to where you're literally useless other than showing off your muscles.
Yeah. That's perfect, thank you. That's a great, comparison. Um But yeah, one of the best lines in the movie, I think, is when Fitzlaban, says that we should just wait till the Allies get here, so they can wipe out, um, the Nazis. And then Girdler argues back that, and letting Europe pay the price, for that, um, the destruction of Europe, basically. And it's interesting. I imagine most people think that they're being hyperbolic. That when they say the destruction of Europe, I bet a lot of people, especially now, are thinking, no, Europe still exists, right? Like they think that's what they're thinking. I mean, I think most people think that is like, oh, they just like Stauffenberg's uh, children survive and his
Yeah.
wife survives. Oh, they're just being hyperbolic. Oh no, the Allies will spare, Europe. Europe's not going to pay the price. But
Yeah.
that's not at all true. The destruction, basically, Europe has been remade in the
Yeah.
image of America.
Absolutely. Like just the looking at the human toll on a civilian level that was required to fully conquer, not only from the Allies, where you see things like the unbelievable toll from the firebombing of Dresden, and just the fact that almost every German city had at least a quarter to half of it destroyed, like physically. But you also then have the other half of the equation where Stalin comes in from the east and takes over, forms the Soviet Union up to the Berlin Wall.
Well,
Uh,
the Warsaw Pact, you mean?
or yeah, sorry, the Warsaw Pact. Like there was uh, an unbelievable toll that was paid on from both fronts because this plan, this um, conspiracy failed.
I mean, there was a whole nother genocide committed against Germans by Stalin on
Yeah,
on his way to Berlin.
yes, which had been perpetrated by the Germans going to the east. Like it was
Sure.
very much a true face-off between two evil superpowers, the likes of which the world has rarely seen with the atrocities that were committed. But yeah, it it's easy to just think about the fact that we inflicted so much damage on Europe. But I like until I listened to the Dan Carlin series of Ghosts of the Ostfront, I didn't know just how horrific that battle between the Germans and the Soviets was, and how devastating it was for all of Eastern Europe.
Well, and also participating in that battle were also were not just Nazis, also sort of Ukrainians, Belarusians, Eastern Slavs who basically joined the joined the Germans in the fight against the Soviets.
Yeah, and many of them were even pressed into military uh, work where they had to fight for the Germans and they had to fight well. They couldn't flee, otherwise their family would be killed, and they knew that.
And that was kind of the point about on almost on both Soviet and Nazi sides is that basically you fought or you died. Um, it was
Yeah,
a lose-lose situation for pretty much everybody.
yep.
And it's not like it's not like the British and the French and the Americans coming in was like amazingly better for anyone.
No, but it also wasn't nearly as evil between the two sides because the
Sure.
Germans knew they couldn't use the same tactics against us because they still wanted to be eventually accepted. Like whereas against the Soviets, they just wanted pure destruction and they were vile beyond anything they showed on the Western front.
Sure. Well, that's I mean yes. So but all of this comes down to the sort of the destruction comes down to total war that the
Mhm.
philosophy of total war and the requirement of um uh unconditional surrender.
Right.
So and that was the question of even if the resistance had overthrown Hitler, if Stauffenberg had succeeded and they had taken command of the government, it's very possible that they still would not have allowed the Allies would not have allowed a conditional surrender of some kind or a truce. The
Yeah.
because it at that point is basically you know in treating them the same way, like the think considering them responsible for the things that Hitler's government had done.
Yeah.
Um, Even though, of course, Americans weren't affected really by Nazi Germany. There was never real. I mean, other than our support um, in Europe, other than us fighting in Africa and Europe,
Mhm.
which was all on the offensive for us.
Yeah.
We were never attacked by the Nazis
Right.
by or Nazi Germany. So
Yeah.
it's quite interesting in some sense, but of course, you know, the Allies wanted blood too. It's not like I consider World War II a war of all villains. I don't see any. I mean, there were individual heroes, and we're kind of seeing some of that in the movie in the sense, but they didn't represent the side. Those who represented each side basically was some form of a villain, not to the same degree, but
And
villains.
I can see your point. I'm not willing to personally go that far though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, FDR was definitely a villain in my opinion. The
I'm not going to say I disagree with that.
well, that's what I mean. The
But I'm saying that I look at America as more than just FDR, though.
Okay, but then we would have to look at that's why I'm saying that there are heroes on some sides, but the people making the decisions, the people in charge, were all villains.
And
That's
I'm not willing to go that far personally, but I can see why you're saying that.
well, FDR, Churchill, and Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. Um, I don't remember. I don't know that much about the Japan, but definitely the leader.
Hirohito.
Well, I don't know if I consider Hirohito, but whoever the actual leaders of the government were, because it wasn't really the monarchy wasn't fully in control of of Japan at the time, and then you have the communist Chinese, the nationalist Chinese. So I would say, at least at their heads, they were all complicit to the tragedy that was World War II. Um, Anyways, so but we have these little heroes, I guess you could say, and Stauffenberg is an example of one of those little heroes. I guess you could say the only leading hero was Pope Pius XII. He was the only
Yeah,
leader of a country that was really, sort of heroic in nature. Of course, it's a very small country, and you didn't have much to be able to do. Now, it's kind of like even some of like the neutral powers were kind of complicit in some ways. It wasn't the Swede didn't the Swedes fund everyone?
I don't know the specifics on that.
Yeah, I don't know that one too. I would have to check. Maybe it was World War One that Swedes funded things, but Swedes are always considered sort of the peaceful people. But my understanding is they definitely did some funding of war. I don't know if
Yeah.
it was World War Two. It might have been World War One. But this is kind of the thing: is that what was this? What was the world of Europe prior to World War One was obliterated by World War One, and then
Yeah.
had to then and when a vacuum of power is created, something has to fill it,
Yeah.
and all things that filled those vacuums were extremely terrible for all of society and all of civilization.
Well, I'd say it even goes back before then to the French Revolution and Napoleon taking over pretty much all of Europe.
Yeah, we could go all the way back, but we could also keep going back too.
Yeah, yeah,
Like at that point, it's we're almost endlessly going back until we get to Adam and Eve.
yeah. I mean, it's human history is, at least in Tolkien's view, basically a long, slow defeat to be capped off with the ultimate victory at the end. And there will be small victories here and there, but ultimately things do get destroyed and removed. And he's very much anti a progressivist that things get better and we progress as time goes on.
Yep, definitely the long defeat,
Yeah.
definitely, and Stauffenberg represents sort of the the willingness to fight back against the long decline, even though it's sort of inevitable. And his failure also represents that kind of too.
Yeah, and again, getting back to what you mentioned before with the need for possible success, that's for, physical war. Even though we know it's going to be the long defeat and that ultimately we aren't going to be able to, you know, transform the world, it's not going to be saved until Christ comes again. And so we don't have any hope of success there. We're still called to engage in that spiritual battle every day.
Well said. Yeah. Um, I think we should leave it there. Do you have anything else you want to add?
The only other quick observation that I was just thinking about for those three things for the definition of right wing of believes in inequality, hierarchy, and traditional morals. Is
Mhm.
that like we said that you have to have the traditional morals in order to guide the other two things. But what almost always happens when you're seeing um, the when you're seeing a somebody being portrayed as a right wing villain is they'll only believe in hierarchy or inequality or both, but they'll never actually have traditional morals. But they're essentially conflating all three, saying like, "Oh, look, they believe in inequality, therefore they believe in all these horrible things." Because they associate believing in inequality with actual evil things like, oh, he believes in inequality, so he's a racist, or he's an anti-Semite, whatever. They never actually have a true right-wing villain that has all three of those things. They just conflate them by having them believe in one of those things.
I would say also a lot of villains are left wingers. They just don't recognize them as left wingers.
Right, exactly. Just like Hitler was not a right winger, but they associate everything on the right wing of the US as fascism.
Well, I do think I don't know if from a cultural standpoint, I would say Hitler was a left winger, but but at least from sort of a, I guess, structural sense, in some sense, in a he used right wing positions as a way of getting into power,
Yeah.
but he wasn't, but most of his like background, most of his like personal beliefs were left wing in general.
Oh yeah. You can't be a right winger and be a full blown occultist like he was. Just can't happen.
I don't know. I think you probably could because it would be a different traditional morality. It would be like a pagan morality. I think pagans would still constitute right wingers, possibly.
Well, that's a conversation for another day.
Sure. But I think it's kind of like how you could have Hindu right wingers. Like I don't think having traditional morals in some sense, what tradition that is. I think that's kind of the question.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
because to have left wing morals would mean more so a rejection of whatever traditional morals there are, some
Okay.
sense. So I think that would be different for different places, which is one of which but that's all but I'm not 100% on that. I'm also trying to figure out what right wing and left wing really looks like. What sort of, cuz these are obviously three important elements I think that you can judge, but they're not full definition
Yeah.
of right wing. So that is a different discussion at some time, but I hope everyone enjoyed the episode. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check out my Substack, and God bless everyone. Bye.